Hi, I'm Ashley with Campbell. Thanks for investing your time to help your community be a great place to live. Before you watch the video, make sure to click the subscribe button so that we can help you make educated decisions as a board member.
So thank you, everybody, for joining us today and giving us the opportunity to speak with you with your interest in the Paint 101, the fundamentals of architectural paint and coating technology. As you can see, the course number is there for your reference. This presentation is protected by the U.S. and international copyright laws with Sherwin Williams, and the program is registered with the AIA and CES and camped for continuing professional education credits.
We mentioned in the previous slide, it's copywritten and protected. However, feel free if you want to take pictures of the slides with your phone or anything, but we will be sending out a copy as well. So we don't want to scare anyone off with, the first few slides.
So what we're hoping to learn today with the objectives that we have is functional properties of paint and coatings, paint process, budgeting, and warranties, to be able to identify different sheens and know when to use each one. The importance of this is contacting a paint manufacturer to specify the best coatings for your project, selecting the right primer by understanding the role that a primer plays in the long term for the outcome of your top coat, and then the evolution of our paint technology.
All right. Go ahead.
So your course description today's architectural paint and paint coating products do so much more than protect a substrate and provide color. Recent technology and advancements have provided coatings that can also solve problems for commercial and residential interiors.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So multifamily and apartment homes, a lot of things that we consider when they're apartments is especially with, a frequent turn sometimes in cooking. We have odor eliminating technology that does help. Also, if you have fire or anything in a unit, we've got technology to help with that. Healthcare facilities, we have our microbicidal paint that kills diseases and helps, especially in gyms, in your condominiums, or anything of that sort. And then this course will also provide the fundamentals of the different paint systems and the technologies, mentioning those few things.
Before we get into here, maybe we should introduce ourselves briefly.
So I'm Jill Negron. I have been with Sherwin Williams 21 years. I've been in the property management HOA position for 3 years now. And part of my job is to come out and evaluate your properties, help with any repaint that possibly coming up in the future, as well as any maintenance needs that we find that you might need help with, that you can maybe save money, do it in-house instead of hiring somebody to come out. So that's all part of my job to help with the specific properties in HOA and condo management.
And I'm Mike Hazlett, and this is my 13th year in the paint and coatings industry. Been with Sherwin through the 13 years. Came up through different territories throughout South and Central Florida, residential repaint, commercial markets, property management markets. And a year ago, I started working directly with engineers. So that's where I teamed up with Jill, and we're just trying to offer our assistance through anything paint and coating, specifically me with the engineering community, which you guys are also in contact with. So with that little background on us, we'll talk about the introduction here.
So yeah, basically with the agenda today that we're going to be covering is the introduction to paint, the specification decision tree. So in that, we'll go over what's important in the specification, why we should have a specification at the beginning of a project to help. We're going to go over primers, binder types, the innovative coatings, as we briefly mentioned with the microbicidal and the odor technology, and then your environmental considerations, which is going to be big in our future.
Towards the end too, we'll get into budgets and maintenance and things that you might see on your property and how we can address those concerns. So that's something we've added on to this presentation, hopefully to be of value for you guys.
All right, so paint serves three important functions, as you can see here. It protects your substrate from weather, from dirt and stains, wood rot, and corrosion.
And primarily to protect and to decorate. That was the main function of paint for many, many years. But now, like you'll see here, we're offering more and more technology to not only just be a protective or a decorative product.
So it enhances aesthetics. The colors a surface, which is the aesthetic part of it. It provides a desired sheen, so our flat or satin if we want a little bit more protection, and highlights and design elements. Paint also transforms the look of a room through color, sheen, and its ability to highlight certain design elements. Our advanced coating technologies help reduce odors. They reduce airborne formaldehydes, which, as we know, formaldehyde is in everything. When you do a remodel, whether it's your clubhouse, if it's units, your property management office, your flooring, your carpeting, anything has formaldehydes in it, and they're harmful. So we do have our airborne paint that helps with that. And then we have one that inhibits growth of mold and mildew on painted surfaces, and also that kills bacteria on the surfaces.
And we'll have slides that get into a little more details on that later on. So moving forward, this gets brought up, our specification decision tree. This was something that you may experience if you walk into one of our paint stores, or if you have one of us come out to your property. Usually the discussion is, hey, Mike, or hey, Jill, we need paint. And that's just a very broad statement. So then what we're going to do is take kind of that wide net and funnel it down. Most of the time you'll be asked right off, are we doing the interior or the exterior? That's going to, start that funnel. And then from there, we're going to talk about what substrates. Are we painting stucco, wood siding, vinyl, concrete? That then narrows down. So we start thinking in our heads, okay, we have products in mind now, we're on the right track. Then we'll talk surface prep, what kind of condition the building or the project is currently in and how we're going to address that. And then that should put us on the right path to discuss the appropriate primer and top coat. And we'll kind of get into some examples here now. So like mentioned, there's different substrates that are going to determine what paint or coatings we're going to put on your specification made specifically for you. So we're dealing with gypsum board, concrete, CMU, ferrous metals, stucco, of course. And we want to make sure that the condition is appropriate as well. So is this a new project that's going to require a primer? Has it been previously coated? If so, we want to make sure it's in good sound condition. We want to make sure there's no rust, it's been cleaned, maintained, and just make sure there's no grease or oils. And that is something that sometimes gets overlooked. So we want to make sure that these are being addressed during the paint selection process.
Yeah, so basically we would come out and evaluate and look over all of these subjects that Mike is talking about. And we do with our work walkthrough of the property to evaluate all of these things to make sure we're recommending the proper coating and things get prepped the proper way prior to the coating.
You may hear a beeping sound coming through the computer. I don't know what's happening with my PC, and I apologize. It kind of comes and goes. But moving forward, see here. Okay, so surface prep. We're starting to get into this discussion. These are the four main factors. I always kind of use the saying, make sure it's clean, dry, and dull. One of the examples that kind of common I use when discussing with different opportunities, take a concrete slab like a driveway. You want to paint your driveway. So that's just an easy example. Let's first make sure it's not crumbling or cracking, or there's no major defects there. And typically from there, we just want to make sure that it's clean. So no oil, grease, sand, dirt, all that can be easily removed. Pressure washing, or could be mild surface cleaners, different projects, different processes. And then of course, dry. And we know, especially here in South Florida, the humidity and the heat play into effect there. Quite often, in the example we're using, the concrete driveway, you can look at it 2 or 3 hours into the day and think, oh, it looks pretty dry. I would challenge you to take maybe a plastic sheet or some type of like bisqueen and kind of lay it across maybe a trash bag. Lay it across that concrete slab. Come back in 2 hours, maybe after lunch, and more than likely you'll have condensation underneath that bag. And that is showing, even though you visibly can look at it and it looks dry, that there could still be moisture coming out of that surface. And you can apply that same kind of theory to your stucco buildings or other areas as well.
Yeah, parapet walls is a good example of that too. You can put on there if you think that there's some water intrusion coming from behind the parapet wall where the roof lines up. That's a great way to see if we've got moisture coming through there.
And one of the last things, and very important, is a dull surface. You want to have a profile. So if you were to take that surface and put under a microscope, you would see little peaks and valleys. And that's going to allow that coating or that paint to dry into the surface, not just dry on top. So if you run your finger across, say, that concrete driveway, it's going to have a texture compared to if you went into a Costco or a Walmart and put your finger across the floor, which I don't recommend. It's going to be very, very slick. And you can imagine painting on top of that won't have a good adhesion rate.
So one of the questions we always pose when we are going out and they say, well, we've had a problem, we've had moisture, we've had something, trying to investigate maybe what happened if there was improper surface prep or there's some other underlying issues when we get called out to a complaint. If we ask, can you guess what percentage of coating failures can be directly attributed to inadequate surface prep? So the answer is 80%. Coating integrity and surface life can be reduced because of improperly prepared surfaces. So 80% is quite a big number to consider when we're talking about surface prep on there. And again, when evaluating the surface and the prep required, consider the condition it's in and answer these questions that's up there. Is it how clean is it? How sound is it? How dry and how dull is it?
And we asked to address all 4. You can't really get away with 2 out of 4 or 3 out of 4. Reset my. There we go. So then we're moving along the process here. Okay, Mike, we've addressed it's clean, dry, it's dull. We talked about a few things. So what's the best paint system? And that still is going to come down to what the job calls for. So if it's an exterior coating, we're not too concerned with odor eliminating technologies. If it's interior, we're not too concerned about if it can withstand wind-driven rain. At least we hope not. So with that, some of the things that we do want to address is, do we need it to be a very washable paint? Of course, durability gets brought up. Color and gloss retention, especially for exteriors. And if it's inside of a healthcare facility or some type of lab setting, we want to make sure it's chemically resistant, corrosion protection as well for industrial settings. And with that, there's also the discussion that's had, especially in the last few years, about the VOC regulations and making sure we're meeting strict VOC and Green Globe accommodations, especially if your building is looking to achieve certain accreditations or credits for that. And all that information too can be found on our data pages as well as in our specifications. And of course, online, there's all different resources there as well.
So yeah, when you get a specification from Sherwin Williams, the data pages come right with it. So if you have a digital copy of our specification, there's a link for each product we recommend that you can click on and read all of these VOC regulations and have the knowledge of that.
In different areas too, I've dealt with engineers that did work out in California, some do up in New Jersey or Connecticut. They're going to have different regulations. So a preconceived knowledge of, oh, this is how we did it in California, not exactly how we're going to do it here in Florida. So that's something else too that might get brought up in discussions. And the next thing too, this has always been a fun discussion for me, discussing film thickness. Many times I walk a job site and it gets brought to my attention, hey, Mike, it's very important that we have 2 coats. And while that's a very common kind of demand or expectation, I am more concerned about film thickness and if that takes one coat or 7 coats. That's up to how you apply it. For me, when warranties are being discussed and we're talking about the proper adequate surface coating, I'm looking at the thickness, not the number of coats. And that thickness is measured in mils. And a mil is essentially a unit of measurement used to determine film thickness. And 1 mil, as seen here, is 1/1000th of an inch, about the width of a sheet of paper. In some applications, that is all you need to meet standards. Oftentimes, for an exterior, for a building, it could be 5 to 7 mils. Results may vary there. And typically, and if I've ever been out to a job site or you've seen one of our reps out there, they use what's called a wet film gauge, about the size of a credit card. And it's going to have little teeth on there. And while they look like they're about the same, they're not. They're different lengths. So we'll simply, when someone's spraying a wall or rolling out a wall with a roller, we'll walk up right after while it's wet, press it against the wall, take it off, apply it to a piece of wood or cardboard, and the last notch that has a coating on it will give us our thickness. Very state of the art, it's very primitive, but with that, this really gets us
A
what we
visual,
need in
yeah.
a visual. And this has come down, this is a huge talking point, especially with the engineers I deal with. We want to make sure that the coatings are being applied at the proper thickness. There are other ways too, if the film is already dry. Ultrasonic thickness gauges, those are a little more high tech, and that's not something I primarily use. We have access to one, but I use this almost daily. So
Yeah, this is a good tool when we're out in the field and we're doing tests to make sure that the painter, your contractor that you've hired for your job is putting the coating on per the specification that has been provided, because they can't argue with you over this. You can go out, you can show them, and it's, as it says, it's very primitive, but it's very straightforward.
I have been known to surprise on job sites. I usually don't tell them when I'm coming because, of course, that's when we're going to be spraying at the best practice. I sometimes just show up and then I walk up and hit the wall and I get a couple weird looks, but I'm getting true results. And that's something that I know that the board or the customer can appreciate, as well as myself, especially when we're backing and reinforcing a 10-year warranty. So let's move along here.
All right, so let's get into primers. Let's talk about our primers because it's the foundation of any paint system. Just like our preparation of our surface, once we have a properly prepped surface, we want to talk about primers now. We want to take into consideration the substrate. Is it interior, exterior? What kind of environmental exposure you're going to have? Are you by the water where you got a lot of sea salt on there? Are you maybe by a major highway where you've got a lot of dirt and a lot of grease and oils from trucks that are coming by? And then what kind of top coat are we looking for? What kind of warranty? What's your maintenance system? What is, how much money have you saved up in your reserves? What are we all looking at? So primers are, have a variety of different, how do you say it?
Attributes or
Yeah,
characteristics.
I guess characteristics based on what we're evaluating out there, and they're compatible with many of our different top coats that we have. So adhesion is the number one for a roll of a primer. If it's metals, we have primers that prevent corrosion. If you have piping in your garage systems, your underground garages, any of your steel piping around the property, any bollards, if you have commercial properties, anything of that, you've got the corrosion resistant primers. The primer also helps seals the surface. So if you have a building that hasn't been painted in quite some time and it's pressure washed and you find that it's still very chalky, a primer can help with this. It can help prevent that chalking from coming through to your top coat and then delaminating. So we don't want that to happen. It also can block stains if we have any kind of graffiti, if you have any kind of water stains or anything of that, we've got stain blocking primers for that. And then we also have block fillers and surface primers that are a little bit thicker to fill in cracking and so forth.
Yep.
So your key ingredients in your primers here, as you can see, are your pigments, your binders, your liquids, and your additives. Your pigments are in your higher quality paints have more of the all important prime pigments. These provide color and hide, which provides easier application, greater durability, and better color retention. The binders, higher quality binders adhere to the surfaces better, provide enhanced film integrity and longer lasting performance. And this can make for more resistance to cracking, blistering, and peeling. Liquids, it's simply the vehicle that allows you to get the paint from the can to the surface. And then the additive, they're ingredients that give the paint the specific benefit that it might not otherwise have. So we have our self-cleaning technology paint, which sheds dirt, which is one of the paints that we use quite a bit, that we recommend, and it's been great for us. But that is one of the specific additives that particular paint would get.
Yeah, exterior and interior are going to have different compositions, of course, too. So different discussions there. Oh, I have a can of exterior paint. Could we use that for an interior project? The way that's composed in that can, it could be a negative benefit. So it's important to ask those questions ahead of time as well. Yeah.
You know, we have a few questions here. If you guys want to take a few, might be good.
Sure.
Sure.
All right. So one question here is, what is the difference of purchasing a paint that comes with primer or purchasing the primer and paint separately?
Can I take this one?
Mhm.
All right, I have fun with this. It was taught to me years ago, paint doesn't know when to be a primer or when to be a top coat. It goes on the wall or the surface and it dries. Now we have top coats that have very good adhesion ratings, and that's essentially how we would kind of market a paint and primer in one. It's always important to have them categorized separately. In a sense, that way we're addressing the specific needs with the surface or the substrate, and it could require a certain primer to better benefit. If it's a wood or a chalking stucco surface, and all in paint primer in one may not have, you know, the certain benefits there. A few years ago, I'm sitting in my barber's chair, and we got on discussion of paint and primer in one. He asked me this. And I give him a similar explanation. He says, oh, it's kind of like shampoo conditioner. And I said, okay, you have my attention, keep going. He says, well, I would never recommend a shampoo conditioner in one. It's always important to shampoo, then condition. That's the only way I've ever done it. And it's just that way you're getting the best benefits. So that's my ongoing example and comparison. It kind of sounds goofy, but it kind of makes sense too, to where it's just best to address it separately and get the best results.
Mhm.
So that was a good analogy. That worked out good.
For the guys, it's the car wash and wax in one. No, you got to wash your car, then you got to hand wax it after. It's the only way it's going to work.
All right, so here's another one. Can primers also provide the same properties of a waterproofing membrane for concrete surfaces?
Short answer,
Yeah.
no.
Okay.
You know, I get brought in on a lot of jobs, take the catwalks, the horizontal surfaces for balconies. While we have waterproofing products, it's best that we address that with a waterproofing membrane. And of course, these are conversations we have with engineers or with GCs. But a simple waterproofer and what was the first part of the question?
The primer, can they use a
primer?
as a
Yeah, sorry.
waterproofer?
Is not recommended. You're not going to have the same benefits as a full membrane waterproofing system.
Correct.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, so then let's do one more. How many coats are standard for a building exterior made of stucco?
So that's going to depend on the condition of the building, how long has it been since its last repaint, and the color choice. So that's hard to determine. If you're using same color, if you're not changing color, the condition of the building is in decent shape, you would use a coat of sealer to, again, uniform primer, a sealer, to help with the adhesion of your top coat. And you should be able to have one top coat. If you're going through a major color change, so your building is peach or yellow, and we're going to an off-white, there's a possibility it could need two coats. Again, we would come out, determine that. We could put samples up on the wall. Your contractor could do that. So that's kind of hard to narrow down and give you a straight answer.
And
All right,
again, the mentioning of how many coats, it's more important to recognize again that the paint thickness or the millage. That's where it's really going to be. That's what's really looked into on our behalf.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, why don't you guys continue and we'll hit some more questions at the end.
All right. So with this, we'll go ahead and talk about so the previous slide was what makes up a can of paint. But it's important to realize too that binders are essentially the different types of paint. And you see here, these might look familiar to you, whether you use them around your house or different projects. Alkyds, latex, epoxies, urethanes, even hybrids, and it kind of gets lost in your head. Well, which one do I use? So we'll go through each one and the benefits and some of the pros and cons of each one, and kind of compare and contrast. So first off, alkyds, or most commonly referred to as oil-based paints. It's one of the oldest technologies that it's been around for a very long time. And it's a synthetic polymer derived from petroleum or even vegetable oils. And some of the benefits of oils over the years, you get that smooth, like gloss finish, especially for woodwork and cabinetry, furniture, trim. And it's very strong, very durable, great for all weather conditions. More on that in a minute. And it's a very hard, non-porous finish. I get called on a lot of restoration projects, for instance, like Palm Beach Island, historical homes. They still want to push the oils to keep the restoration process and keep it kind of in that same aesthetic. But then with that, we need to address some of the negatives. So if you've ever opened up a can of oil-based, it's got a strong odor to it. And if we're in a multifamily or a condominium, I'm sure you don't want that, lingering through the vents or coming down the hallway. Very slow drying. When I used to do color matches, I had to give myself a few extra hours when I'm color matching oil bases because, it does take a longer time to dry and even longer than that to cure. If we're familiar with the yellowing, that's something that is kind of inevitable with alkyds. When it's nice and bright white, years later, it has that yellow tinge to it. And oils will become brittle with age. And that's kind of one of the ways we can determine if you have oil base on your surface now. If you go to peel it off and it cracks off or comes off like a nice break, more than likely it's an oil. If it kind of folds off and kind of peels off with some flexibility, we can lean into where it could be a latex or an acrylic.
So something else about alkyds too, if you've ever noticed, especially on railings or doors, they tend to attract mold and mildew, especially in areas that don't get a lot of sunlight or by the water again, where like if you're on a beach side and the sun is rising and now the sun's in the west, on the east side, you'll see where it gets very little sun, you'll find a lot of mold and mildew will be attracted to that, especially on your railings again and your doors. So it's kind of old technology. They don't have oils, with the VOC compliance laws in California, and they're slowly fading them out. And you're going to see that they're not going to be available because of, as we're going to talk about later on, with a lot of hybrids that are coming out that give you the same exact things that oil-based have, but the characteristics, but moving away from all of that.
Yeah, for sure. And while the technology has gotten much, much better with oils, it's just a very niche market for it now, like Jill was saying. So latex, we all know it. We all love it. It's kind of what the industry standard is now, our water-based coatings. Flexible, like compared before with the oils, great color and gloss retention, resistant to moisture because it is water-based. Lower and even zero VOCs, which is a very common buzzword now. We want to make sure those volatile organic compounds or the kind of off-gassing or the byproduct of paint is minimal to zero. And we're accomplishing that now with the newer paint technologies. Not exactly suitable for high performance. I wouldn't go painting maybe a water tower or some type of industrial product, piping or factory equipment with just a latex water base. You want to make sure it's very clean. So again, addressing that clean, dry, dull principle will be vital for a good water-based coating. And if you take water-based and kind of give it that 2.0, that revamped, better version, that's where the acrylics come in. Even more improved, greater color and gloss retention, faster drying times, more flexible, can be used on a different array of areas, interior, exterior. And again, we're still meeting those low to zero VOCs. And it's important to address with the acrylics that you want to make sure the substrates still are very clean and that the surface prep is done properly. So it's basically just a increased, better version of your typical water bases. Epoxies get tricky. We deal a lot with this for floors, most commonly. Typically too, like your garage floors and different facilities. Very hard, very durable, resistant to corrosion and chemicals, much more than a water or an oil base, and great moisture resistance as well. It will have an odor. That's just kind of part of it. And you want to make sure that the contractor or the engineer you're working with is familiar with how to apply it. It's a two-part system. So with that, you're mixing your part A and your part B, and there are certain parameters that must be followed, pretty strict. First part is called your sweat time. So once you mix that part A and part B, and you mix it with your paddle mixer, you need to let it sit for a certain amount of time. And that's a very critical part of epoxies. And also after that, you have your pot life. And that pot life is how long you have to apply it to the floor or to the substrate before it will literally just start hardening on you. So I get all kinds of phone calls. Hey, Mike, we painted this floor last night. We came in this morning. It's still sopping wet, hasn't dried. And then I ask, okay, well, after you mix part A and part B, how long did you wait? Then there's a pause. And then you realize they never put in part B and they just put out part A. So you want to make sure that it's being attended to and by a qualified contractor or painter. And you don't want to have the guys mix it and then go to lunch for an hour and a half, realizing that the sweat in time was 20 minutes and then it starts to harden in the can. And now we're just wasting product, time, and resources.
Yeah, so you want somebody experienced with epoxy because they're very difficult to work with, and you have to follow the parameters that are on the data page for that. And epoxies, you will not see exterior.
Yeah.
We don't recommend it for exterior because they do fade. They will chalk up because of the ingredients within the epoxies in there.
Yeah, and we'll have garages where the doors are open 6-8 hours a day, and after a while, several months even, you'll see almost where the frame of the sun in a door was causing chalking and fading, and then of course you're losing that integrity of the product. Moving on, urethanes, and this has come a long way in recent years, much more flexible. And the cool thing about urethanes, if you have exterior railings or certain things that you want a nice color retention, deep colors, dark colors, like you see in the pictures here, a typical water-based paint may not adhere to this or give the benefits of a urethane. And with that, we're still achieving those low VOCs and zero VOCs. So
yeah, urethanes are great for high traffic areas. If you have a very busy walkway, an area that is like your social area for outside by pools, railings, anything like that, because of the color and gloss retention and the moisture resistant, it's an excellent product for high traffic.
Yeah. In the hybrids, these are awesome kind of technologies that have come out recently. I've used several of these on different projects, even in my own home. I recently, 5 years ago, painted the cabinets in my kitchen with a acrylic alkyd, and that basically gave me the best of both worlds between a latex paint and an oil-based paint. So it gave me that durability and that hard, smooth finish of an oil, but it also gave me the soap and water cleanup, the faster dry time, and virtually no odors of a water-based. So the technologies are there, and those are questions that you can ask, to say, okay, well, we like these attributes, but we also like these. How can we come to an agreement here?
You see a lot of the hybrid paints that different manufacturers as well as Sherwin offer use in hospitals, emergency rooms, patient rooms, veterinary offices, places like that where you want those different qualities of the good cleanup, but the water-based, low VOC. So those are common, places that we see a lot of this being used in.
Yeah, and of course, industrial and commercial settings as well.
And we did actually have a few people ask what VOC is.
Volatile organic compounds. Go ahead.
Simply, it's kind of like the off-gassing of the paint. So when you apply paint to a wall or a surface, as it dries, it emits these organic compounds. So if you think of like an oil base, it's going to emit that strong odors. It makes your eyes water almost, what's coming off of that paint as it dries and as it cures. And we're to the point now where we have low VOCs or zero VOCs, to where when I'm painting a bedroom or something, I'm not feeling the paint. That's kind of a way I can put it. Yeah, that's kind of an easy way to put it.
I mean,
Are there any VOC regulations?
In Florida, there's not VOC regulations. However, certain builders, contractors, designers are saying, hey, we want a low VOC or a zero VOC, because why not? Whereas other states will have much stricter regulations on that.
Like California. And that's what, going back to what's in that green guard, when the designers or the architect are asking for certain products, certain products will be under that green guard with those low or zero VOCs in there.
Perfect. Okay, great.
It was a huge benefit 8, 9, 10 years ago. Now it's kind of industry standard. So
any other questions, or you want us to move on?
oh yeah.
I'd say go ahead and move on, and we can answer some more at the end.
Okay, so let's move into our advanced coating technologies. So as we spoke about in the beginning, we have your odor eliminating, your formaldehyde reducing, your antimicrobial, cross-linking technology, and your microbicidal. Advancements in chemistry have led to innovative new coatings that offer special performance features above and beyond different binder types. These technologies allow the design team to help solve problems beyond aesthetics and protection. The special technologies we'll be discussing include odor eliminating, as I mentioned, your formaldehyde, and all the other ones that we talked about there. So what if a paint could help reduce odor caused by smoking? And we talked about, if you had a fire in a unit, the cooking odors, which sometimes if you're in an apartment building, we always run into that. Smoke smell. Coatings with odor eliminating technology are useful for areas where odor can accumulate. Your fitness centers, your gyms, hotel guest rooms, as we know, long-term care facilities, and nurseries. We see that we can use a lot of the odor eliminating technology in there.
And it usually gets brought up as a question, well, how does this work? And I asked one of our chemists one time at a sales conference, and I started to fall asleep. It was very technical, but essentially as the odors come in contact with the wall, it neutralizes those odors, almost like baking soda in a refrigerator. That's the way that I could understand. So that usually gets brought up, but here we go.
All right, so what if a coating could help improve the indoor air quality by reducing airborne concentrations of formaldehyde and other aldehydes? So as we mentioned, commonly found in household products, your building materials, any insulation, your flooring, fabrics, curtains, anything, has formaldehyde in it. And some people are extremely sensitive to this. They can get a burning in their eyes and their throat, nausea and wheezing and coughing. So the Department of Health and Human Services determined in 2011 that formaldehyde is a known human carcinogen based on sufficient human and animal inhalation studies. So you may not be aware of that there is a product can specify that can help promote better indoor air quality. So there are several paints out there and coatings out there that can help reduce the formaldehyde, just as with your odor reducing, there are also products that do that. And then going to your mold and mildew, there are paints out there as well and coatings out there that help with mildew growth, which you see in bathrooms, locker rooms, saunas, and spas. The big thing with mold and mildew is there's no paint out there in the picture you see here that you're going to take that mold and that paint and paint right over that picture that's there with that mold and mildew. That mold and mildew must be treated prior to putting any coating on there. So we don't want to put straight bleach on there. You know, we want to make sure that there's a mixture of 3 parts water, 1 part bleach, and that'll help kill and reduce that mold in there before you prime and top coat that. If you try and paint right over any kind of mold or mildew or algae, you're going to see that staining coming right back through on there. And mold and mildew can trigger several things. And you'll know in your house, if you've ever had an issue with your air conditioning handler, your intake, you've got allergies, asthma, can cause upper respiratory. So mold is extremely dangerous, and we want to try and stop that with our technology.
Yep.
Okay, so then we have our cross-linking technology. So, you know, paints have come such a long way from what I remember, but you've got technologies where the cross-linking can almost create a barrier. So if you've got food stains, if you have kids and they were writing on the wall, that you can literally just take a sponge and wipe these, wipe the surface to get the stains off. You typically see this a lot in your daycare centers, your high traffic area hallways, where these technologies and these paints can help keep your coating life cycle much longer than we normally would have in the past.
Yeah.
And then what if a paint could offer your clients an additional tool to help prevent the spread of bacteria? So going back, we can sell this and we can put this in any kind of a hospital, doctor's office, veterinary offices. A lot of these paints help reduce the bacteria that can be harmful to us.
Yeah, and it's important too. I've seen comparisons on different building specs. Germ-free or bacteria-free paint, you want to make sure it's registered and approved by the EPA. That's something that will be present on the data page. So if you're going to invest, in a technology like this, you just want to make sure you're getting what you really are, going to benefit from.
And that will again be set on the data page for any manufacturer's paint, so
Yeah.
you can have that.
And that you
Mm-mm.
No? Okay. So gloss and sheen level, this is a very common discussion I have too, walking different job sites and when we're discussing repaints and renovations. And there's a whole long explanation here, but it really just boils down to this chart. If you are looking to hide imperfections, if you have a lot of holes that were spackled over, you had restoration work done, you're looking for something to help kind of hide the imperfections, flat would be the way to go. And if you want, as you move more towards more sheen or more gloss, you are going to get much more durability, washability, but you are going to lose that ability to hide imperfections. So again, another example, a car example, if you take a high gloss, very high end, almost like a sports car paint job, you'll see a little nick or a scratch much more than if it was a car that was 20 years old and lost kind of its luster and it's got a couple nicks and dings on the side. It's a little more forgiving. So there are benefits to both. When I painted my house and went from a flat to a satin, just a small step, little more sheen. It gives that like new appearance, but it also gave me a little more durability. But there were a couple areas where I had some little stucco repair from a previous, and you can see that a little more. So often too, questions get raised. I've had, hey, Mike, we want to do our condo in a gloss. We want the best durability. We want the best washability. I would advise against doing large exterior surfaces in a gloss because it will just be blinding and it will be very kind of almost an eyesore in a sense, but also it's going to be hard to hide all those imperfections, whether it's an old building or even a new construction building. So
Yeah, gloss is more typically seen, or semi-gloss, again, going back to your railings, your doors, anything of that where you want a lot of durability on there. And like Mike said, the gloss or semi-gloss will show every little imperfection. If you've had any kind of restoration work done in your building, we really strongly try and go away from that.
So, and those are discussions per every job has a different way, ways we can discuss it and look into it. So this breaks down how we determine gloss, looking at it from an angle and how it reflects off of that angle. A little technical, it's not something really that gets brought up a lot. But if you were to basically take a glossy surface and catch it at a 60 to 85-degree angle, you'll see that reflectivity. And that's how you can determine your gloss and your sheen. So we'll kind of move on from that. It just gets, every once in a while I get asked, how do you even measure this? This is kind of the way I measure it. This shows the difference between a flat and a satin when being applied to a restoration project. So on the far right, that's the original coating. You can see where they've had some restoration work done. They probably pressure washed it already, got it nice and clean. And what we did was a test area. So on the left side there, you'll see the number 2 on the far left. That is the flat surface. Even though it looks a little more more of a luster, it looks more vibrant. That's a flat because it's not reflecting more light than the satin, which is right there to the left middle. So you might think, oh, well, the satin, that's going to give us more durability, but it's also reflecting that light at this angle, this street view angle. So me personally, I would lean into the flat. And either way, you're going to have all the benefits and durability of our coatings. You're just having a little more with the gloss being added to it. And this kind of goes back to some of the stuff we've kind of touched on already. I think it's only one slide. The environmental considerations. Looking into the Green Globes or LEED certifications, these are things that this is all information we can provide or any coating manufacturer can provide if that's of importance to you in your project. And you want to make sure that products are Green Guard certified or gold. This kind of falls into if you ever see your electronics where they say they're UL certified. That means that refrigerator or that microwave you bought is meeting all the regulations. It's up to its current regulations, and we're moving in the right direction there. So I won't spend a lot more time on this because it's either brought up full extent or it's never really a consideration. So this is always the fun part. This is stuff that we have added onto our presentation. The budgets. I typically don't get brought in on budget discussions. Thank you. I don't know if are you brought in on a lot?
Sometimes I am. And that's one of the questions that I try and train my reps to ask when when a community is getting ready to do a repaint. What in your mind, what should a repaint cost? What is your budget for repaint? Do we have reserves put aside? So there's a lot of things that take into account. And if we were to know what your general thinking of what a repaint should cost for your community, what it cost last time versus what maybe an increase would be, because it's been 7 or 10 years, we can help with that if we were to know a basic detail of the budgets for a community.
Yeah, and common questions, I'm asked often, well, how many gallons is this going to be? That's hard to tell. How much it's soaking into that surface, how many coats or the millage, how many coats to achieve that proper millage. There's a lot of factors there. So I never will say, oh, the painting contractor should charge this amount, because that's not for me to say either. When examining bids for a paint job for a project, it's pretty common as seen here. This might move 5% or something, but typically, don't hold me to it, your labor is about 80 to 85% of that bid, and your materials, or in this case, paint, is about 15 to 20. So while we can talk about these awesome upgrades and all these features, that's only upwards of 20% of that bid, whereas I don't know what the painting contractor, their payroll, if they're renting equipment, if they have the equipment, how many days they're going to be on the job. There's too many things. So I kind of take a step back there, but this is about what we can assume, that 15 to 20% for materials.
Yeah, I mean, in their labor too, they've got to take into an account, like Mike said, if there's any staging, if they're going to need lifts, if they're going to need to get a boom in there, how many crews do they have? Things for you to take into account too when you're hiring a contractor. Are you going to hire a contractor that has one crew and it's going to take them 5 to 6 months to finish your job versus a contractor that maybe has several crews that can move much quicker? That will reduce your labor costs because they're moving quicker. You have one crew pressure washing, then you've got a crew following behind priming, and then a crew following behind painting. So your job moves much smoother. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration with that.
Yeah, especially at this point we see in the markets with insurance and all that too. I mean, that's all takes to effect of that bid. So here's an example. I have some notes here I'm going to read off of how this plays out with a project traditionally. And then let's say we decide on an exterior condo to go with that self-cleaning product that we keep mentioning. So regardless, the labor will be $85,000 for the coating specified. And in this example, we'll say that even if we mark it up 40%, there's a 40% premium for the self-cleaning, and that's kind of exaggerating, but that would bring the total cost of the materials to $21,000 compared to that $15,000. So that will ultimately just increase the bid $6,000. So then it's up to the decision makers, the board, whoever the powers that be, is an extra $6,000 for this upgraded product worth? And that's where we can discuss and kind of compare data pages, do drawdowns and samples for you, and kind of show the benefits comparing our standard systems and our premium systems. And that's something too that we get involved in all the time.
So yeah, but between the traditional and the advanced coatings too, even though it's only a $6,000 difference, you are getting an extended warranty to take into consideration.
Yep.
Take into consideration, what's your maintenance program like? Do you have a contractor that you've worked with in the past that offers a maintenance program once the job is done? Oh, Mr. So-and-so on the board will offer you to come back every 2 years, every 3 years, pressure wash, evaluate your property, make sure that the paint is holding up to what, was promised through the vendor and through the manufacturer of it. So a lot of things to take into account with going with an advanced coating.
Yeah, the warranty is a big touch point. If we treated the left traditional paint as, let's say, a 7-year warranty, very common in the industry, and the advanced coatings on the right was a 10-year warranty. If you took that 100,000 divided by 7, if you took the 106 divided it by 10, you will see it's cheaper or more cost effective, per year for the advanced coating and the upgraded package. Yeah, you're paying an extra 3 years, but you're also covered for 3 more years in a sense of, if it breaks down that way.
But that gives you time to get more money in your reserves as well, which I don't think a lot of people think about, especially with the laws that have changed in Florida. If those 3 additional years where you're preventing from having to assess your homeowners, where you can put more monies in the reserves, it really does help considerably in the long scheme of things.
Yeah, kind of. Yep.
So we have about 4 minutes left. So if we can get through some more of this presentation, and then, if people jump off at 1, they can. And if not, we'll do a little Q&A after we're done at 1.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, let's go through really quick. I just want to do a touch point. I mean, we're almost done. I want to touch on the specifications and the importance of that. Mike and I can breeze through this in a few minutes. The specification is super, super important. We really push to have a specification prior to the job being starting. We come out, we can evaluate the building, we can talk to the board. What are their expectations for a coating? What are their expectations from their manufacturer that's going to be providing the product? So Mike and I can come out and look at the building, provide you with a scope of work that can then be handed out to the contractors, so everybody is bidding apples to apples. It includes everything that you're seeing on the screen there, and, you know, going through this, making sure you have a comprehensive scope of work is just something that really we find helps in the process moving forward. So you're not having one bid that's $50,000 and then somebody else is charging you $2 million. Why are their bids so far apart? Having a specification from any manufacturer helps to control that and get you bids that, how do you say, are more specific to your property.
Especially the application part. One guy or one company wants to only spray. Another guy wants to use a 1-inch paintbrush. I mean, obviously those prices are going to vary. This makes sure everything's uniform, like Jill was saying.
Yeah, so your specification will include everything that's on your property. So if you have parapet walls, if you have unit entry doors, if you have garage doors, you know, every specific surface is detailed in there with what the prep should be for it, what the proper product is for it. And that is all included in there so that everybody knows exactly what is expected of them when the job starts and they can bid it accordingly.
And then throughout the process, Jill kind of touched on this, if you want to talk about her.
Yeah, so one other thing with the specifications is once the specification is done and the job has been awarded, that specification needs to be followed. And we will come out and we will provide site visits during the job. We will track it based on what the expectation is of the board and or property manager. So if you want us out there once a week, we'll be out there once a week, and you will get those site visit and those reports digitally, or you can have them, you know, written out. Whatever is easiest for you, we will be there from the start of the project, when they're setting up, when they're pressure washing, to the very end, and to make sure that everything is done. And that's where we do our mill tests. You know, we provide all of the reports for that for you and make sure that they're getting the products. Oh, and we will also check their receipts. We've done that before to make sure that they're buying the proper amount of paint that we feel, you know, as we see the project moving on, to make sure they're buying everything that has been promised to you.
Yeah, if it's 100 gallons of top coat, you know, that ends up being purchased and 8 gallons of primer, that's going to raise a big red flag for us.
So, and again, everything is available to you digitally, so we can send it to the board of directors, we can send it to the property manager, and then once the warranty is administered, that is sent to you, but it is also kept at our district office if you ever need to get a copy of it.
And it looks like we have 0 seconds left, but one part of that was just a couple areas here, and we can do this after we answer the questions, kind of show some examples that perhaps your building may have and what that could mean. But again, I'm not a engineer. If there are major areas of concern, that's where you want to get someone else involved. But these are things that can be easily identified and hopefully addressed quickly. But we'll take, I guess, questions, or
Yep.
we're out on time.
Yeah, we can go ahead and do that. I am actually going to go ahead, for anybody who does need to leave, let me go ahead and launch our poll just to get your feedback on how we did today. We would really appreciate if you can go ahead and take that for us. Also, as I mentioned at the beginning, I will be emailing out this presentation, a link to the video recording of this webinar, contact information for Mike and Jill, and information on all of our future classes after. I will also be giving the attendee list to Jill and Mike to get property managers their CEU credits. Please give them up to 3 weeks for that. And then I guess you guys can see the Q&A if you guys want to go through the Q&A together right now, or you want me to read it to you. It's up to you. That way you can pick some of the best questions.
I gotta see how I can pull this up.
Or I can give you some. That's fine.
Sure, that'll be good.
I'm
I don't
on
want to
here.
touch the wrong thing. And
all right, so let's see. Let's do a few, and then so if anybody does have to leave, you can. But this is just going to be our Q&A portion. And I'm sure
for those who are leaving. Oh,
yeah,
thank you very much for attending. For those who are...
Oh, sorry. What were you going to say?
Sorry,
we were saying thank you to everybody who's leaving for giving us the opportunity today.
And I will be including Jill and Mike's emails. That way, if you have a question or we didn't get to it, you can always shoot them an email with the question. I'm sure they'll be happy to get it to you guys. All right, so let's look at some of these questions. Let's see here. Do you have a recommended floor epoxy or product type for concrete floor protection?
Where's the concrete floor? Is it inside? Is it outside?
Lots of questions. All
Now we're
right.
doing that decision tree. First question,
Exactly.
inside or outside?
Decision tree. All right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's look here. We talked about that.
But feel free to reach out and we can address that, you know, personally.
Yeah, some of these are they're pretty specific. So let me try to
Yeah.
filter through those. Okay, we talked about that. Let's see here. Is there any value to engaging an engineer for the exterior painting project on our condo? What specs would an engineer produce that are substantially different from what you would do?
So I will write a specification strictly paint and coatings, where an engineer can assess if there's any
Structural.
structural, you know, degradation, any areas of concern. Of course, any condo now has gone through those Sears inspections and those milestone inspections. Those are done by professional engineers. So having an engineer involved will give that extra kind of assessment. I'm only qualified to get into paint and coatings. So I would hate to recommend a system and then it turns out that the beams are structurally, you know, compromised underneath. So
And take into account too, Mike and I are working on a property right now where we took the engineer's report and we encompassed it into our scope of work. So we had specific things that they found, their findings for structural that we took, and then we made a product recommendation. So we kind of encapsulated everything together in our scope of work.
Perfect. Yep, I'm just looking through because a lot of these are very specific to, you know, people's associations. What is the best for driveway coating?
Again, that's a decision tree. What's on it now?
And yeah. Okay. Okay, let me read through. Yeah, a lot of these are very specific. So please reach out to Jill and Mike, and then they can
Please.
get you an answer since they are so specific to your property.
Yeah, we're more than happy to come out, take a look at it. I mean, it could maybe take 5 minutes. It could take, 30. We're here to help.
and we have a team of reps as well
Mhm.
that specifically focus on property management. These are under Jill, and you know that depending on where you are geographically, they'll be involved as well.
Mhm.
So we got you covered. No pun intended.
Here's one. What is your recommendation on painting aluminum rails with some corrosion?
I would say let's address the corrosion first.
Yep.
So we're hitting that clean, dry, dull principle. And again, results vary. There could be a product that I think will be awesome, but then I get there and look at it and realize, okay, there's other factors here that could alter that decision. So I wish there was a one and done, and there really isn't, nor do we want it to be. We don't want kind of a once, we want to make sure it's specifically tailored to the individual project.
Yep. Let's see here. Yes, you will be getting this PowerPoint. I will be emailing that out after. That'll come later this afternoon. Okay. Again, if we didn't get to your question, it's because it was very, very specific to your property. So please just reach out to Jill and Mike specifically so that they can address that. All right.
And if you want, actually, they can email both of us on there,
Okay.
and one of us, they don't have to send it to just Mike or just myself. They want to send it to both of us. That way we can try and answer quickly to them.
Okay. Yep, that's perfect. Let's see here. Do you have a recommendation for walkways?
The decision tree.
Yeah,
The decision tree. A lot of these are the decision tree. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe they can just give one or two.
Yeah, I mean, does this walkway have major moisture issues? And we're on a job site where sprinklers are constantly on this walkway. That's a different product than something that gets zero. So
yeah, I know. I feel like a lot of these questions are the decision tree because it's probably pretty specific to their property.
It's usually how it goes.
Yeah. Let's see here. Can you touch on adding grits or paints with them in it for outdoor walkways to prevent slip and falls?
We always recommend that our stores are asked when somebody comes in for any kind of flooring paint to add an aggregate to it. Just remember, the more coarse the aggregate or the non-skid, the more it's going to texture it and cause a lot of dirt pickup. So we want to be careful, maybe in assisted living facilities, if you put too coarse on there, it could also cause the walkers or anything, the drag, and people might trip. So you have to be conscientious about what we're looking at. And again, we need to look at the area and make a determination.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thanks for watching. For more great educational content, click the subscribe button now.